Thank you very much, Dr. Guerrero. Fish be with you. It would have been more interesting if you talked about sex reversal for tilapia. Yeah. I think there are some tilapias here who would like to do that. Let me introduce our reactors. We'll start with our first reactor. He is the National Coordinator of the Pambansang Kilusan ng mga Samahang Magsasaka or Pakisama. And he is also the President of the Philippine Community Organizer Society or PhilCos. He has been very active in community organization for farmers and fisherfolk. He has an AB Social Sciences degree from this university, the Ateneo de Manila University, and he teaches on a part-time basis with the Ateneo's Development Studies Program. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm round of applause for Mr. Raul Soc Valenzuela.
Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. I was given 15 minutes for my reaction, so what I'd like to do is, for the first 2 minutes, some more introduction, and then we'll see a 7-minute video, and then the next 6 minutes, an elaboration on the video we'll see. Now, this video basically is a product of a 20-year project started in 1989, and it's ongoing until now. And from here, we'll see how this kind of project will be able to provide us insights and inspiration how to face the great challenges of climate change vis-a-vis our concern for food security. Okay.
This 998-hectare hacienda in Bicol, the Unión Agrícola y Pecuaria del Sur de Luzon, better known as Pecuaria, was once owned by Don Severo Arroyo Tuazon. For 3 decades, the hacienda ran a farm producing mostly cattle.
Pag-umpisa natin dito, wala talagang tao dito sa loob. Kasi yung iba no, hindi naniniwala sa kanila na yung lupa.
Nung ginawa dito sa amin, hinapin namin ito sa 5 housing unit. And sa housing unit number 1 noon, karamihan dito, pasture land. Housing unit number 2, sugarland. Housing unit number 5, rice. Nung pumasok kami, ang unang ginawa namin, nagtanim ng kahoy para maproteksyonan yung mga crops na tinatanim dito para gawing viticulture.
With the redistribution of the land to 426 agrarian reform beneficiaries, support services came in from both government agencies and NGOs.
Nagkaroon ng irrigation project sa loob ng Pecuaria. So ngayon, ito na yung 128 hectares na binigyan ng puno ng NIA na 14 million para may sustain yung organic farming, bigay ng support yung DILDRA, nagbigay ng capital noon ng 1 million na yun ang medyo nakatulong pag-umpisa ng Pecuaria doon sa palay trading at the same time doon sa sugarcane production.
Miller, like the other agrarian reform beneficiaries here, got 1.7 hectares of land. the farmers built their houses on small plots of land. Most of the land they used to plant sugarcane or rice. Today, there are hundreds of farmers from Pecuaria and the neighboring towns producing organic rice and supplying the co-op's trading and marketing program.
Dati yung hindi kami nag-galing, ibinibinta namin sa mga traders. Yung mga traders ang nagsasabing, ganito na yung presyo nyo. So wala kaming magawa kasi silang nagdidikta. Hanggang sa nag-decide rin kami, gusto rin namin maranasan na kami rin ang magdikta ng presyo. Kaya nagpo kami tinturo dati. Ngayon, ginagawa namin yan. Kami mismo nagsasabi, ganito yung presyo ko. Kaya nagpo ka, may pudir ka rin talaga na magpataas ng presyo.
It is easy to see how Miller and the other co-op leaders convinced their farmers to shift to organic farming. 1. Organic rice sells higher in the market. 2. Without chemical inputs, it is cheaper to produce. 3. Since the land is restored to its natural productive state, the farmers get better yields. Organic farming meant better incomes for farmers.
Trade rice too.
This agrarian reform community, now a successful cooperative, has become the single biggest producer of organic rice in the country today. Now, Pecuaria specializes in red rice, which it packages as healthy rice and sells in the largest supermarkets in Manila.
Yung asset namin, mga more or less, 30 million ang asset ng Pecuaria. Hindi pa kasama yung Pecuaria. So, ito pong Muscovado, mayroon kami ito ngayon na almost 19 hectares na Muscovado sugar na plantasyon na sa lugar. Ito sa 5,000 naman, kikita ka na more or less mga 50,000 yung nito mo.
A happy byproduct of raising poultry is chicken dung, which the farmers use as organic fertilizer. In 2003, the co-op made its first 100,000 from organic rice trading. Then in 2004, they made their first million. With a growing demand for organic food, the trading and marketing of organic rice has become very lucrative for this agrarian reform community. Today, Pecuaria is already nearing 8 million pesos in sales of organic red rice and 2 million pesos for organic fertilizers.
Sa amin, dito sa Bicol, may connection. We don't purchase at a pressure, such as the premium with the customers.
It has not been an easy journey for Miller and the other farmers in Pecuaria. It took them years of struggle and many lessons learned to become one of the most successful agrarian reform community in the country. The what a difference it has made in the farmers' lives and their families.
Panganay namin, Bachelor of Science in Agriculture, major in Animal Science. Ito yung pangalawa, nagtapos siya ng animation.
Ito naman isa, agroforestry. So, agroforestry yan. Ito naman isa, mas namin, Bachelor of Science in Puti. Masaya kami kasi at least napapatapos namin yung mga anak namin. Galing na yan dyan sa pinaghirapan namin na sakaan bilang mga agrarian organization.
kwento ay may central theme, basically people power. Organized people power. It took the 426 agrarian reform farmers 4 years of struggle until they get to own the land, and another 12 years for them to develop the land. And they developed their varieties of rice, 11, 26, and then blend the variety. That's how we call their commercial varieties of rice, organic red rice. They reforested and diversified their farm systems over these years. And it took them another 8 years to finally have greater access to market for their product. They were assisted by NGOs in this process. They got substantial control over their land, their seeds, their production asset and technology, their market, and therefore they gained the confidence to face head-on the various challenges facing them, and I may add, including the climate change challenge. This successful project was made possible because we basically used people power as a strategy. And therefore, this is the theme. Is it possible for us to push for a people-powered food security measure in uncertain environment? And this story provides some evidence that it can happen. And in this story, there are basically 3 key elements. One is organization. Second is the catalyst. You've not seen the catalyst here. And third, and it's time for budget hearing, I must say, budget. And for donors and for many of our policymakers, I guess this is very important. These 3 elements. Let me discuss a bit on these 3. First, organization. They, the farmers, the main stakeholders, they who till the land to survive and live a decent lives, they who suffer and or benefit from the good graces of nature and climate change and governance, they have successfully and effectively organized themselves. I called Miller yesterday and inquired on what has been the impact of climate change to their lives, and he said, well, it was true because of long dry spells and long rains. From 95 cabans per hectare per harvest, they're now down to 80. So that's why I think all the proposals here by our colleagues, from Dr. Padulina and Dr. Guerrero, such as the need for an agriculture, weather, and climate change policy, governance and institutional capacity building focused on community participation, national marketing and trade, early warning system, and for our small fishers, rainwater harvesting, bolstering brackish water ponds, among others, are all welcome proposals. I think BDCI and many other organized groups would be happy to know and to engage themselves in. The question is, how are we able to plan and implement all these proposals in a massive scale in a short time possible for us to make a real difference? I think that's a major concern for all of us. Now, given the seriousness and the urgency of the challenges posed, especially by global climate change to food security, we agree with the position reached by 400 multidisciplinary, multi-locational, multi-stakeholder experts who composed the International Assessment of Agricultural Knowledge, Science and Technology for Development, or ESTD project, that a business-as-usual response, especially given the limits of our existing political, regulatory, and governance systems, cannot be an option. We need a fundamental shift in agricultural knowledge, science, technology, and the linked agri-food system policies, institutions, capacity development, and investments. We need a paradigm change, a transition to sustainable, organic, agroecological, resilient agriculture which addresses functionality, which means addressing the needs of the small scale and family farms, uses systemic and holistic approach, considers it a solution to hunger, poverty, and health issues, and as a solution to climate change challenge. We propose further that in the Philippine context, again, I'm repeating, we need no less than a people-powered food security measures to face the uncertain environment. Now, this kind of proposal implies the education, organization, and mobilization of some 7 million small farmers and fishers and indigenous peoples in a systematic manner. Most of them are not really organized. We showed here an example of agrarian reform community, and we have, for example, 4.7 million agrarian reform beneficiaries who have been given land since 1972, but only 300,000 of them, less than 10%, are really organized. And we're not even talking about the quality of organization. Pecuaria is one of the few who can really say they're making it. But this is a great challenge. If you have more than 90% of our farmers and small fishers are unorganized, then the basic services of government will not be able to reach to them. And no amount of great leadership and governance we have will be able to make a real difference. So I'm proposing perhaps we need to take a look at the second element of this, the catalyst. Key to the intervention of mobilizing people power, in this case, in Pecuaria, was a community organizer. So I'm very biased, you can imagine. A trained professional community organizer. She was a graduate of Ateneo de Jaga, which graduated valedictorian, and we took her as a community organizer and we deployed her in this area. She took it because it was the most challenging. Farmers were fighting against each other, and she was the one who was able to group themselves into a coalition, and then they were able to deal with the issues later on, various issues. She was deployed by Peasant Federation. It was our federation then, Kusog Pakisama, and then she was able not only to mobilize the community, but also she was able to mobilize various institutions, various NGOs, various government agencies. We saw in the NIA and later even business groups. Now she continues to assist them after 20 years. She's not there anymore, but she continues to assist the community through technical advice, through mediation. Sometimes the leaders fight among each other, so she mediates. And looks like 1 year will really not be enough. Looks like, well, 20 years perhaps. Perhaps we need the kind of leadership that may see long-term visions and come up with long-term programs. So now, as I said earlier, this is basically one community. Now we want to change the country. Perhaps we need to deploy perhaps 4,000 of such young professional community organizers in all our 40,000 rural villages. And this is where I come to the third point, budget. Most of these initiatives are basically NGO-led, grants-dependent. And not much budget and funding has been coming from government in areas of systematic organizing of agrarian reform beneficiaries, as we saw it. In the area of organizing small fishers, we have around 2 million of them. And at the rate we're moving, we got a good fisheries code in 1998, 13 years ago. It was a very good law, which says 15 kilometers of the municipal waters will be given primarily for small fishers. Roger here was one of the authors of that. And I commiserate with him that after 13 years, only 57 or 4.6% of the total 920 coastal municipalities have been delineated. And it will take 200 more years at that rate before we do the first step of implementing the fisheries code. First step is delineating the 15 kilometers. If you don't delineate, commercial fishers will come, 1 hour of operation, 6 months of hunger of small fishers in the municipality. If you don't delineate, the municipality cannot do long-term plans. People will not have the authority to enforce fisheries laws. But if you delineate, just like what happened in Romblon, in a span of one year, 270% increase in apprehension rate, and the small fisheries income doubled from 200 to 400 pesos a day, fish catch, hook line, sinker. What I'm saying is perhaps we need to seriously consider government funds from BIFAR, DADAR, and others to go into investments such as community organizing. If we can fund our soldiers, tens of thousands of them, to fight insurgents and spend, of course, we have a budget more than 100 billion pesos for, to fight for peace. Perhaps it's time to fund some 5 billion or allot 5 billion pesos also for community organizers and get many young professionals here who may want to take on the challenge of doing community organizing work, or young students here who may want to take on that role after college. That's about budget, after all. So again, the importance of, after all, many of the great things that happened to us as a nation, such as a return to democracy and sanity, was through people power. It was through 3 people power revolutions that we ousted dictatorial, corrupt governments, first in 1986, second in 2001, and then through electoral people power revolt in 2010. It was also through people power and social mobilizations that we had meaningful and substantive laws, which are key to ensuring food security and effective climate change mitigation and adaptation. And these laws were the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program. It was not just passed that easy. There was quite a mobilization there. The 1998 Fisheries Code, the 1997 Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, the Agri-Fisheries Modernization Act, the Climate Change Act, and now, more recently, the Organic Agriculture Act. Well, most of these are not really being implemented well and fast enough. Finally, most of our outstanding cases of implementation of these laws, such as the one I mentioned in the video, PDCI case, the Sumilo farmers, the fisheries of the fishers of Romblon, the indigenous peoples of Coron in Palawan, were through organized people power. Perhaps it was time to upscale these initiatives. And again, for many students here, you may want to consider a career in community organizing after college. So this is, again, just like my colleague from SC Johnson, this is also an advertisement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sok Valenzuela. So it's time for people power in food security. I'm sure everybody would like to have another public holiday added to the calendar. Okay, my text mates in the audience have been texting me and they've been requesting for a climate change inside the auditorium. So may I please request whoever is in charge of our air conditioning to increase the temperature a bit so that it's not too cold. Thank you. Now we'll go to our second reactor. From our local experts, it's time to go to our international expert. Our second reactor is the country director and the representative of the United Nations World Food Program here in the Philippines. He has been with the World Food Program for most of his professional career, having joined in 1989 as a volunteer in Sudan, a country in Africa. Interestingly enough, the word Sudan or Sudan in the Ilonggo language means viand. It refers to food. So, ladies and gentlemen, without much further ado, our next reactor is Mr. Stephen L. Anderson.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all, and thank you very much to SC Johnson for sponsoring the event, and to Ateneo for hosting the event, and seeing that it's a very good turnout, though some people, I think, seem to avoid coming to the front area. But it's very heartening, and it shows the interest and enthusiasm for the subject. And also to thank the preceding speakers. I think that they all have highlighted extremely important food for thought, or fish for thought, in terms of making us think about what the impact of climate change on food security, and including even the perspective of the agrarian reform. I think that's also an important dimension. Just to talk a bit about the World Food Program, and who we are and why we're here and why we're interested in trying to tackle, together with you in the Philippines, the phenomenon of climate change. I'll give you a bit of background. The World Food Program is part of the United Nations system. We're actually 3 agencies that are based in Rome that really are related to food and food security and agriculture. So there's the Food and Agriculture Organization, which is FAO. They focus on agricultural productivity. The IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, which is more focused on giving loans to smallholder farmers. And then the World Food Program is really concerned with access to food and making sure that, and our slogan is a bit closer to SC Johnson's. It's really, we try to ensure that getting the right food to the right people at the right time. And of course this involves working with governments, it involves working with NGOs, with people's organizations, But we're not working in all the countries worldwide. We're really focusing in the most food insecure countries or most food insecure areas of other countries that are maybe not the poorest, but they have a problem either related to hunger, due to conflict, or natural disasters. Of course, if you've been watching some of the international news lately, you will see that there's a terrible crisis in the Horn of Africa related to food. And actually, almost 13 million people are extremely seriously affected. And there's actually, we've formally declared a famine in parts of Somalia where people are literally dying. That is not entirely climate related, even though there is a drought that is the worst in the last 60 years to affect that region. But I would say probably most of that problem is man-made. But it's just that's the type of situation where the World Food Program, among many other actors and players, is trying to struggle, racing against time, trying to help save lives. Here in the Philippines, we actually came back to the Philippines. We had a presence from the mid-60s to the mid-90s where we had a countrywide program. Then we phased out, and because we were again focusing on the poorest countries worldwide, but we came back at the invitation of the government to particularly work and support food insecure, conflict-affected communities in Mindanao. But also we have been increasingly involved in the whole area of disaster preparedness and response. And so particularly in Luzon, which is very highly affected, this is something that is extremely serious, and of course it is very much related to climate change. Now, just to make a few comments that to explain why we are very much concerned, and in particular in Asia. They estimate that the number of climate-related disasters have quadrupled between the year 1980 and 2006. And of course, the number of people who are affected are significantly increasing as well. And it's just to emphasize the people who are affected the worst when there is an extreme weather event or related to climate change are the poorest and the most vulnerable. And of course, when we talk about, we saw earlier the graph about the increasing price of rice. Again, this is the poorest people are the ones who feel the pinch the worst. And so whatever we do, we have to really be thinking of the impact on the poorest and most vulnerable people. Now, we estimate, I think there are estimates that if climate change continues, the impact on food security in Asia would be as follows, that up to a 50% decline in terms of wheat production and up to 17% in terms of rice in crop yields by the year 2050 compared to the year 2000 levels. And this would actually affect the food security of about 1.6 billion people in Asia alone. And another aspect is the issue of this would also contribute, this is also already contributing to an increased malnutrition. And of course, if they have done projections and that even, and malnutrition is a problem here in the Philippines, and the Philippines is actually one of the 36 high-burden countries with 90% of the children who are stunted. So this is, but it's expected that with climate change increasing, an additional 11 million people in Asia would, 11 million children would be resulting from climate change compared to a no climate change scenario. And it's also just to mention that Asia accounts for almost 90% of the people affected by disasters worldwide. 90%. That's a significant number. And about 60% of the economically active population and their dependents. And it's really 2.2 billion people rely on agriculture production for their livelihood. So you can see the very important connection between these increasing disasters and the agriculture, and of course the need to design systems and of course I think that it was very important that all of you heard about what is being done in IRRI or in the academe to study not only the effects but also the best way to adapt and some of the technologies that need to be invested in, because even though we believe that even with the very dire statistics, we believe that there is the technology is there. We have the resources, we have the human resources, but what we lack is sometimes the organization, sometimes the resources, the political will to actually make sure that this is translated into action. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I know you've been listening to all of us for quite a while now, and I'm sure you also have questions and comments that would come later. But I would just like to leave just by emphasizing the four key foundations for successful adaptation that I think they were actually contained in the Human Development Report of 2007 and 2008. But I think that they summarize in a nutshell also the things that need to be done not only internationally but also certainly here in the Philippines. And I know here in the Philippines you like the 4 P's, 3 R's, or whatever. Well, I'll give you 4 I's. 4 I's. And the first I is information. It's information, just ensuring enough information for effective planning, including forecasting, disseminating, and meteorological information. So that's strengthening Pag-asa in the local context. So really the first I is information. The second I is infrastructure. You need to have climate-proof infrastructure, be it flood defense, drainage systems, reservoirs, wells, irrigation canals, and also the right type of soil conservation measures. And the third I is insurance for social protection. So these are the different types of social protection measures that really require investment in order to mitigate the effects of climate change. And these can include employment programs that protect nutrition and health when climate shocks lead to reduced food availability, or cash, or the second one could be a cash or food transfer schemes that provide a longer-term safety net. A third one could be a crisis-related transfers and cash transfers or other transfers of productive inputs, or access to insurance schemes for vulnerable groups who may not have access to formal insurance markets. And the last is, but not least, is institutions, to strengthen the institutions for disaster risk management and to have more effective early warning and response systems. Clearly, in the Philippines, we have the policy framework, we have the institutions, but it's very important that having the law is not enough. We need to actually work on applying it, strengthening these systems in practice, and testing what works, and when things and adapting and moving ahead. So I just wanted to say that those 4 I's, I think, would make certainly a difference internationally, but also here in the Philippines in terms of looking ahead. And finally, just to touch on the point of that was raised earlier about food markets and being able to import if it was necessary. Now, the World Food Program is very keen on looking at this area, but it's a tricky one because ultimately, when you start to talk about food reserves, you get businessmen nervous about that this will affect the prices and that this will hurt their business and that it will hurt trade. But at the same time, we do see, because of all the increasing number of disasters, the need to have more information in this area. We are actually piloting right now in the West Africa region the use of a regional food reserve, and just to see also, working of course with regional institutions to see how this would work in the context of West Africa and to learn lessons that could be hopefully used in other parts of the world. But it's not that there is a lot of discussion on this subject. Of course, when there have been, in the time of the rice price crisis in 2000, 2007, 2008, there was great concern because the countries that were surplus producers kind of closed their borders. And then that also increased the price further in the countries that actually needed to import rice and other commodities. So this is something that the World Food Program, among other World Bank and other institutions, strongly send messages for countries not to they should not restrict the flow of food in these when there is a type of crisis. So there is growing cooperation in this regard, but very much still needs to be done. So I'll leave it there, and with that I'll just say, food be with you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. We're going to take a break. It's a 15-minute break. I wish I could offer you some food, but yes. But this is one break where we don't have any food security. Now, just a reminder, during the break, please take the opportunity to fill up this portion here at the bottom part. So you can write your questions. Kindly indicate your name and the name of your institution or organization so that we'll know where the question is coming from. 15 minutes, everybody. See you in 15 minutes. Maraming salamat po.